We're on Daf Yutes. And we actually are up to V'od. Let's see if we can find the place. It would be, I'm just guessing, estimating about 15 lines up from the bottom of Yutes Amud Aleph. And if it helps, the line starts the word Toy. You see such a line? And if you move your finger to the left, then you'll see the words V'od. One line below that. Yeah, I'm sorry. V'od Tanya. That's long. Od Tanya. V'od Tanya. This is a list of kashas on Rav that we had yesterday, and the Bryce is now going to address a case of two brothers that were married to two sisters, and they both died without children. And one after the other, when they died, their wives fell in front of the third brother for Yibum. Rabbi Shimon poter b'shtein min hachalitzo min hayibum. And the reason is because each one of these ladies is what's called achos l'kukas. Let's say, for example, Rachel falls for Yibum. So she's now the sister of Leah, who's also falling for Yibum. And that gives her the status of achos zikukaso. And the Torah says, "V'isha lachoso lo sikach litzor," and we derive from this pasuk that b'shah shenasu tzoros zula zu, they both became tzoros. Now, what does it mean they both became tzoros? I mean, Rachel was married to one brother and Leah to another brother, but through Zika, when they both fall for Yibum to Levi, they now become tzoros, because Zika is considered kiknusa dam. So it's almost like they're both married to the same Yavam. And now the Torah says, Lo sikach litzor, lo yehelo likuchin afilu biachaskim. We see clearly that according to Rabbi Shimon, in the case of two sisters, they are pturos min ha-chalitzo min ha-yibum because they had sorrows through Zika. Now, the Gemara's kasha here, it's a little bit subtle because the Gemara doesn't really spell out the kasha, but the kasha is based on the fact that presumably when two brothers are married to two sisters and both brothers died, one died before the other. So let's say Reuven died and his wife falls for Yibum, and then Shimon died and his wife falls for Yibum. Both will fall for Yibum to the same Levi, but if it's Bazech or Zeh, if it's in sequence, then what's going on over here? We can't say that they're both tzaros at the same time, meaning that, let's say, Leah, the second one, that's Shimon's wife, that she is a tzaras, a tzara of her sister Rachel through Zika when there was no Zika. I mean, Shimon was alive at the time that Rachel fell for Yibum at the time of the death of Reuven. So therefore, if according to Rabbi Shimon, the way Rava presented it, Zika is kiknusa dami, then what happens is, at the moment of Reuven's death, and his wife now falls for Yibum, we'll call her Rachel, to Shimon and Levi, she's already kiknusa dami. And if she's kiknusa dami, then later on, when Shimon dies, and his wife Leah falls for Yibum, she won't fall for Yibum at all, because she is the sister of Zikukasa. And through that Zika, so basically the argument here is that there's no reason to exclude Yibum from the first of the two ladies.
Because there's two living brothers. Can't be.
Well, I don't even have to come on to that, Steve, because right now Shimon is alive. So if Shimon is alive and well, Reuven died. So why shouldn't we apply the principle of Zika kiknusa dami of Reb Shimon, the logic? And therefore, we already have.
But to which brother, Shimon or Levi? Because there's
Oh,
two living brothers.
No, but remember we came to the conclusion, I don't remember all the proofs, that Zika is not only b'chad achi, but even b'trei. I don't remember, how we proved it, but
I forgot.
yeah, that's all right. Now, the Gemara really wants to know why there shouldn't be Yibum according to Shimon to the first of these two sisters, being first meaning Rachel because she fell for Yibum before Leah. Rav Ashi, this is really strange. He did not fall b'zecher. Say you're right. If Ruvain died first and Shimon died second, which is called b'zecher zeh hachinami, then the wife of the first husband who died, meaning Rachel Eshes Ruvain, would fall for Yibum. And later on, when Reb Shimon dies, Leah's not going to pater up Rachel from Yibum. But Hachamai Askina, what's the case that Reb Shimon is addressing? Did nafel b'vasachas. This is a pella. The Gemara is saying, according to Rav Ashi, that Reb Shimon is talking about a case where both Reuven and Shimon died together. Never. There was a calamity and they both died simultaneously. However, the Gemara points out that you're going to have to add one caveat because this question of simultaneity is a universal question throughout Shas. It's relevant to a million different sugyas, whether it's Efshel Tzamtim or Efshel Tzamtim. And the Gemara says, Reb Shimon Savala, ki Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Omer Efshel Tzamtim. That it's possible of two events to take place exactly, precisely, simultaneously. And that's based on a sugya b'choros about a Rachel. A Rachel, I think, is like a shepsel, a female sheep, and she didn't give birth at all. In other words, we're talking about her very first birth, and the Torah says that her first birth is sanctified with kedushas b'char behemet tahora, and yolda shnei zecharim, v'yatzu shnei rasheim b'vasachas. Okay, so both heads popped themselves out of her rechem simultaneously, which I assume, I can't promise you that exists in the biological universe, that two, they're probably preemies or whatever small animals could come out together at the same time. And in that Sugya Bechoros, Rabbi Yosef Aglili says that both of them have the status of a Bechor. They're both called Peter Rechem, and they both are owned, so to speak, by the Kohen. They have to be given to the Kohen. And the Chachamim rejected it. They said, no, it's Yefshel Tzamtzeh. Maybe we don't know which one came out first, and we'll never be able to determine that, but the status of these two Zacharim, each one has the status of a Suffolk Bechor, but it's impossible to say that both of them are Bechoros, Vitoros, Vada. Now, the import of that is that if each Zachar that was born is only a Suffolk, then Hamotzi Mechaber L'Varayim. When the Kohen comes to collect his Bechor, then the Bailam have right to say, go fly a kite, because the burden of proof is on you to prove that this is your Bechor. And he goes back and forth for each Zachar. But according to Rav Yossi, Adaram, both Bechoros have the status of Bechor because of Efshar Litzamtim. And now we're saying that Rav Shimon agrees with Rav Yossi clearly that Efshar Litzamtim, and we could see with our own eyes, according to Rav Shimon and Rav Yosef Aglili, that these two events, the death of these two brothers, took place simultaneously. So then, now we understand why both of them are tzaro zu lezu through Zika, because the Zika emerged for both of them simultaneously, and each one now is rejected, so to speak, from Yivum, and therefore Reb Shimon says both of them are excluded under the pasuk Litzra. He has here a diagram called Kuf Nun Tes. And I don't know what you photocopied and what you didn't, but it's a very simple diagram. You don't need it. But for me, it gives me a chazara at least. It says here that there were three brothers, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Ruvain married Rachel, Shimon married Leah. Mesu Ruvain v'Shimon b'vas achas mamish below bonnet. Naflu shteim lifnei Levi liyivu. L'Rab Shimon kevan shenizkeku shteim liyivu b'vas achas lo hoisa achas mehem ki knusa mikodem. No one had the status of knusa beforehand. Is therefore pturo shteim me'achalitza vayivu. And that's what he derives from the pasuk mitzvah. Rav Papa has a whole new interpretation. You remember Rabosai, since today is what, Monday? Oh, I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday last week, we had a long discussion about Rav Oshia. And this is like the last piece of the sugya of Rav Oshia, in that Rav Papa is rejecting Rav Oshia. So Rav Oshia said, he claimed that Rabbi Shimon, in the case of Achiv Shalochaya Ba'olama, would allow for Yibum, whether or not Shimon had realized Yibum, implemented Yibum before the later of Levi. Right? So you have Ruvain's wife, we called her Sarai in that case, right? And Ruvain dies. Levi hasn't been born yet. And Rachel Sarah falls for Yibum to Shimon. Shimon has another wife named Rivka. And then Levi is born. Now, Rav Papa is going to learn that the case is such that by the time Levi was born, Shimon had already been miyabem Sarah Ashes Reuben. Rav Oshia had a broader scope definition of Rav Shimon, according to which, even in a case where Levi was born before Shimon was miyabem Sarah Ashes Reuven, nevertheless, with the death of Shimon, who was miyabem Sarah, albeit after Levi was born, when he dies, Sarah is misyabemis to Levi. So Rav Papa disagrees with this. Omar, the Yibem, the Achar Kach Nolad following Rav Shimon. When did Rav Shimon say that there is Yibum and he was Mata Yibum? That's only in the case of Yibem, the Achar Kach Mes. I'm sorry. Yibem, the Achar Kach Nolad. Umes, right? And then Rabbi Shimon would say that when Levi was born, what was he looking at in front of him? What was the situation in front of him? It was Ashes Reuben married to Shimon, and therefore the marriage to Shimon of Sarah undermines the Ishus of Reuben. So there's no erev of Ashes Achim Shalohay Balamo of Levi vis-a-vis Sarah, because Shimon had already implemented the Avo. But on the other hand, bin nolad, if Levi was born after the death of Reuven, ve'achar kach Yibem, and Shimon was miyabim Rachel when, or Sarah when, afterwards lo polig, and Rav Shimon is molded to the Chachamim now that Levi could not marry Ashes Reuben after the death of Shimon. And even Rav Shimon is going to be on board here, like the Chachamim, that because Levi was born into a situation when there was a Zikas Yibum between Sarah and himself. Again, when I mean Zikas Yibum, a potential Zikas Yibum, meaning the Ishus of Sarah to Reuven was still very much active, alive, and well, because Shimon had not yet been miyabim her. Therefore, at that moment in time, Rachel, or we'll call it Sarah, Ashes Ruvain became an erva of Achos of Ashes Achim, because Levi was Lohoy Bolamo, and that erva could not be removed. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. Rav Oshia had a proof from the Mishnah. Very nice, Rav Papa, that you want to, reject Rav Oshia's interpretation of the Mishnah, but what about the Mishnah itself? Because if you don't expand the machlokes, this was, again, we're going into the mindset, the proof of Rav Oshia. If you don't expand the machlokes of Rav Shimon and the Chachamim, you limit it to the case of Yibam L'Besof Nolad, then we had the Mishnah Rishon of the earlier Mishnah said that Nolad U'Lebasof Yibam. I mean, Shavayla Rabbanan Itzrich. Why do we need two Mishnayos for the Rabbanan when they only argue against Rav Shimon in one case? In other words, there should have been a Mishnah that deals with the case of not Nolad U'Lebasof Yibam, because that's the case where even Rav Shimon would agree. The Mishnah should have been written in a way that it should have covered just and only the case of Yibam V'Achakaf Nolad, because that's the only case in which, according to Rav Chizda, there is a machlokes between Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan. So why add a Mishnah which is universally accepted, meaning the case, according to Rav Ochi's argument against Rav Chizda, in a case of Nolad V'Achkach Yibam, but Nolad V'Achkach Yibam, there was never a plut at all. So the Gemara answers, L'Rabbanan Itzrich, even though it's a Kal V'chomer. In other words, if the Rabbanan was saying that there's no Heter Yibum in a case of Nolad V'Achkach Yibam, then how much more so in the case of Yibam V'Achkach Nolad? So why do we need two Mishnayos? And the answer is, this is a methodological, literary rule in Mishnayos of Lo Zu Afzu Ktani. Not only in the case of Nolad of Yibam, but even in the case of Yibam V'Achkach Nolad, the Rabbanan say there's no Yibam. Tanya Kavasi, there are Papa, but we have a brisa that supports Rav Papa explicitly, Utivta, and it completely undermines the opinion of Rav Oshia. And the brisa says that Shnei Achim, let's say Reuben and Shimon, V'Olam Echad, so they're alive simultaneously. Umeis Echem, and Reuven dies below Vlad. Amad, Shimon gets up. Achasheni Yazeh. Lasos Maimar B'Yavimto. So let's assume the name of Reuven's wife, the late Reuven's wife, is Sarah. And now Shimon does Maimar B'Yavimto. Below Hispik, Lasos Ba Maimar. Ad shenolad lo ach umeis. So what's the case now? Lo hispik lasos ba maimar. Oh, v'amad. I'm sorry. V'amad hasheni lasos ba maimar. It means that Shimon was preparing himself to implement the maimar, but below hispik lasos, he didn't get a chance to complete his plans. Ad shenolad lo ach. So now Levi is born, and Shimon, who made Shimon, and Shimon dies. Now Shimon had another wife by the name of Rivka. It's her Rishona. The Rishona is called Sarah, who fell for Yibam first with the death of Reuven. Yotza, she's completely Yotza. Yotza means she's completely out of the entire enterprise of Yibum, which means she doesn't need Yibum or Chalitza with regard to Levi. Now, why is that so? Why doesn't she fall for Yibum to Levi? but the answer has to be that Levi is Eshes Ach Shelo Hoya B'Olamo. Therefore, Eshes Ruvain, since Ruvain and Levi were not in the world at the same time, is an erev of Eshes Ach. Mishum Eshes Ach Shelo Hoya B'Olamo. Hashniya Ochel Letzel Miseh Beres. Because Levi and Shimon were alive simultaneously, and therefore Shimon's wife, what's her name, Rivka, will fall for Yibum to Levi. However, the Brisa continues, also B'Maimer, if Shimon had lived long enough to implement his original intention to be Makadesh Sarah with Maimar, the Achakach Nolad Ach, now Levi is born. So again, what's the case now? Very simple. Reuven dies and leaves his wife. We call her Sarah. She falls for Yibum to Shimon. Shimon has another wife, Rivka, and Shimon does Maimah with Sarah. Then he dies. And then Levi is born. And then he dies. Oh, Shenolo Ach Yakach Osava Maimar Umes. Now we have another scenario in which Levi was born and then Shimon did a Maimar. One second. Is this Brisa? We haven't gotten yet to Reb Shimon. That's going to be on Omid Beis. So right now we're studying the Chacham, Rabbanan Shif. Harishona Yotza Mishum Eishes Achish Shelo Haya B'Olamo. So as far as Sarah is concerned, she's Ptura from Yibum and Chalitza because she is an Erev of Eishes Ach. Ushniya, now what's the status of Shimon's other wife, Rivka? Choletzes v'lo misyabemes. Okay. So this is a little bit more challenge. Let's try to figure out why Rivka does not fall for Yibum. So let's just think. Shimon, in this last case of the Sefer, the Brisa was implemented his Maimon. Now, at that point, on a Rabbanan level, Sarah and Rivka become Tsaras. And we just established that Sarah's status vis-a-vis Levi is that of an Erev of Eishes Ach. There's no mitzvah of Yibum because he's Shelo Haya B'Olamo. Now, the moment that Shimon is married to both Sarah and Rivka at the same time, Rivka now becomes Sarah's Erev. But again, that's only on the Rabbanan level. So we're going to definitely require Chalitza here for Rivka. Why? Because Chalitza is actually, because Rivka is actually Zkuka on a Doraisa level, a full-fledged Zika to Levi, and she requires Yibum. Now, we're not going to allow for Yibum because since Shimon did a Maimar, it makes Rivka into its Sarah's Ereva, insofar as Sarah is an Ereva of Eishes Ach Shelo Haya B'Olamo. So that makes sense. Okay, that's according to the Rabban. Now we turn to Yetesa with Beis to try to study Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Diyasa o chalitzasa shel achas behen, oteres Sarasa. Now it says shal achas mihen. The impression you get is either one of them. Wait a minute. Rabbanan said that the status of Sarah vis-a-vis Levi is that of an Eishes Ach, which means there's no possibility of Yibum, obviously. So how does Reb Shimon say Biyasa shel achas mihen poter saras? Can't be. So what I'm going to suggest at this point is that we read the Masifta. I mean, you may have in your Gemara a different interpretation. He says the following. Biyoso chalitzos shel achas men al yidei Levi poteres es sarasa min hayibum o min hachalitza. The ein ze ela im kein chalatz Levi lerivka. I'm not sure if he's being sensitive to our question. Shebakach mimonefshach nifteres Sarah michalitza. Okay, so now we're going through this whole. I was wondering, what was bothering my mind is whether or not there's a possibility of yibum to Sarah. He's telling us now that if Levi gave chalitza to Rivka, okay, mimonefshach. If Maimer is Kona Kinyan Gomur, then Sarah is Esha Shimon Legamre, and there's two Yevamos that come from one brother, therefore one Chalitza will pater up the other one. Im Eina Maimer Kona is Benkach Ubenkach Nifteres Sarah Michalitzas Levi, Shereu Kanolad, Odem Yibumo Shel Shimon, Yasura Ola Bieshes Achshaloi Bolomon. I don't know, it sounds to me that he's not allowing Bia and Yibum to Sarah. Do you get that impression? What?
Yes.
I don't know. What? Yeah. Steve, tell me. I don't see anybody here. I don't know. It just is very fluky. But in any event, what were you arguing? Can you agree with what I said and why? I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Well, it depends if Weimar is effective.
No, but I'm asking a different question. Leave Weimar for paragraph number 2. Paragraph number 1, is there a possibility, is it at all feasible that the bia here that's mentioned here in the Sefer the Brisa of Reb Shimon is a bia between Levi and Sarah? You follow what I'm saying? He's going to have a whole logical analysis here called the Mimonefshah to explain why once Rivka gets chalitza, Sarah's out, free. She doesn't need a chalitza. Right? And that's going to be the Mimonefshah, because if Maimer is a full-fledged Kinyan, so then she falls to even from Shimon, not from Reuven. And if Maimer is not a Kinyan, then she's Eishes Hakim Shalohay Bolam. But I was asking a different question. Let's wait 1 minute. Before the chalitza of Shimon, what happens now? I mean, what happens immediately, with the just 1 second. Did I say chalitza of Shimon? If I said that, I'm sorry. Scratch that. I mean, Shimon's dead already. So we're talking about the chalitza of Levi. So Levi's looking at Sarah, Eshes Ruvain, and Rivka, Eshes Shimon. So if he does when I say he, I mean Levi does chalitza to Rivka, then Mimar Sarah goes free. Sarah's out of the picture. Why? Because if Maimer is a full-fledged Kenyan, then Sarah fell for Yibam through Shimon, and a chalitza of one of the various wives of Shimon is enough to pat up the other one. And if, on the other hand, we don't recognize Maimer as a Kenyan, then she falls for Yibam, then Sarah falls for Yibam. You got to avoid all the pronouns. Falls for Yibam through Reuven, not through Shimon. And in that case, she's Eishes Hakim Shalom Olam. So I don't think there's what? Is there a possibility? The language is very strange. Bi'asa o chalitzasa shel achas mehen poteres es tarasim. So I think the word achas here, or the phrase achas mehen, means vis-a-vis Rivka. Because otherwise the language would have been Misyabemes or Choletzis le'ezim and sheyirtza. You remember that language? Ezim and sheyirtza. Here he doesn't use the word ezim and sheyirtza. He says achas, which I think means pointing the finger specifically at Rivka. I think. So I'm going to read it again. He says, again, I don't know what he means by cholatz. I mean, this Yibum is also an option. Or Elim Kain cholatz. I would have written Elim Kain Yibum o cholatz Levi LeRivka. Shebekach mimonav shach nifteres Sarah michalitza. Mishum shein maimer konare. She's Eishes Shimon. The Yemena maimer konare. Is nifteres Sarah michalitzas Levi. Why? Sharehu kinolad kodem yibumo shel Shimon. Now, in this case, Shimon never did yibum, right? But he did maimer. So now we're saying that Levi was born before the maimer of Shimon. You know that? Let's see. It says. Asaba Maimar. That's at the bottom of your Testament. So it's very possible that the Maimar of Shimon to Sarah took place after the Leda of Levi. And nevertheless, it's Kinolad Kodem Yibumo Shel Shimon and Asura Olav the Isur Eishes Ach. So again, if the connection here is through Shimon, then wonderful. The chalitza, the yibum of Rivka now patches up Sarah because she's another wife of Shimon. If on the other hand the yibum is coming through Reuven, Eishes Reuven, because Maimer is not Kona, then in such a case, Levi was born after the death of Reuven, and let's say he was born before the yibum, or in this case the Maimer of Shimon. And therefore, what's the status of Sarah vis-a-vis Levi? She's an Eishes Achshel Ahoy Bolama. Avol im cholatz lebalas maimar. So until now, we've been focused on Shimon and Rivka, meaning that Shimon had a choice. He would either be Yavin and Rivka, or he did a maimar with Rivka. Now the Gemara, the Brisa wants to suggest another scenario. What happens if what? If Shimon does maimer to Sarah, which that's perfectly acceptable, then just 1 second. What did I just say? What I meant to say was what? What did I say, Jeff?
Maimer Sarah.
Yeah, right. Certainly, the Maimer is with Sarah. That's up to it. That's in all cases. I mean, that's not question. That's not to be questioned. But what is the new case over here? That instead of giving chalitza I'm talking about Levi now in the third, right? Instead of Levi being Choletz Rivka, now I'm going to talk about a different scenario. Levi was Choletz Sarah. Is then Lo Niftera Hatzar. And if you'd ask me why, I mean, we'll see what he says, but I would say because the Chalitza to Sarah was totally meaningless. Or no, maybe it wasn't totally meaningless because there was a tzad to say that Maimar is a Kinyan. Oh, so if Maimar is a Kinyan, then on that side, she needs Chalitza. So now he went ahead, Levi, and he gave Chalitza to Sarah. Yeah, but now Rivka's in trouble because she needs Chalitza. Because the possibility that Maimar is not Kona. And if Maimar is not Kona, then she falls from Shimon to Levi. Therefore, Cholatz Lebalas Maimar, Lo Niftera Hatzara. Okay then? Fine. So that's what we have so far. Now we go on. Knasa. Now Shimon, let's say, did a full-fledged yibum with Sarah. He's also married to another woman by the name of Rivka, Umes. So again, at this point, I would say that both Sarah and Rivka should fall for yibum to Levi. Achach nolad lo ach. So 1 second. Both Reuven and Shimon are gone now. So then there's no Yibum or Chalitza. Let's just see. Yachach nolad lo ach. O shenol lo ach. V'rak achar kach knasa umes. Well, that's the case that we're going to focus on, I guess. Yishtein p'turas min ha-chalitza min ha-yibum. So wait a minute. So in the first case, the achkat nolad lo ach, then both of them are Eishes ach shelo ha'ibol, and clearly there's no yibum or chalitza. Oh, but now we have another case, and this is all Reb Shimon, I think, of nolad lo ach, the acher kach knos. So that means that at the time of Levi's birth, what's he looking at? He's looking at a zika to Sarah Eishes Ruvain and a zika to Rivka, a potential zika to Rivka Eishes Shimon, if Shimon dies without children. Again, if you ask me why Sarah is P'tura min Chalitza min Yibum, that I understand. I know, maybe I don't understand. We're talking about Nolad v'achkach knos, am I right? Yeah. Nolad v'achkach knos. Why? Well, what's going on? Yeah, what?
He's not doing the even after
Yeah,
Levi's born.
Right. Levi was born and then he did you.
Right.
So
Sarah is closer to him because she's still Ruvain.
Right, because the later of Levi took place before the Yibum.
Yeah. So now,
but what about Rivka? She's in Sarah's era. Oh, Rivka becomes Sarah's era. That's good. So that's Mamish approved to Rav Chizda. So wait a minute. Even though here's the Chiddush here, that even though Levi and Shimon were alive simultaneously, and therefore Rivka for sure should have fallen to Yibum. On the other hand, the status of Sarah is questioned because on the one hand, B'shas Leda, Sarah was Eishes Reuven, and that's already an error of Eishes Akshalab Yolov. On the other hand, Shimon went ahead, he was miyabim, maybe that would be mafkia the issues to Reuven. But the answer is no. That Rav Shimon never went that far. Rav Shimon only recognized the hafkas issues of Reuven if that was clinched before Levi came into the world by virtue of the yibum of Shimon. Okay. Now, Knasa v'noled lo ach. Wait a minute, didn't we just have that case? 1 second. Knasa. I know, we were talking about a case where Levi was born and then Shimon was miyabim Sarah. Now we're going to talk about a case where Shimon was miyabim Sarah and then Levi was born. And that, I think, is going to be the machlokas between Reb Shimon and the Chacham. Let's see if I'm right. Shtein p'turos min hachalitza min hayibu, divrei Rabbi Meir. So that means that even though Levi, when he's born, he's looking at a full-fledged marriage between Shimon and what's her name? And Sarah, right? A full-fledged marriage. Nevertheless, she still remains Eishes Achiv Tzol Hayboloma. That's going to have to be the Chachamim of Reb Shimon. Am I right? I mean, the Gemara, the Brisa quotes Rabbi Meir, but it cannot be Reb Shimon. I mean, we'll see Reb Shimon in a minute because we know very well that Reb Shimon holds that at least in one scenario there will be Yibum. That you have to grant me both according to Rav Chisda and according to Rav Moshe. There's no debate about that. If Levi comes into the world and Shimon has already implemented his Yibum, then for sure we have Afkas Ishus of Reuven. Shimon Omer Hoel Uba Umatza'a Beheter. Oh, that's a nice phrase. Mitza'a Beheter. This is the Afkas Ishus of Reuven. Why? Because Shimon is already married to Ishus Reuven Sarah. And therefore, when Shimon is born, the status of Sarah was never that of an erva to Levi. Now he says, that was the language I was looking for before. But before he says, Bia o chalitza le'achas, which can only be to Rivka, but here it can be to either one of them. O chole says when she yirtzeh. Now, 1 second. Wait, here I'm getting a little confused. 1 second. What do you mean, li'ezim and she yirtzeh? Here, where... Oh, I see. So it's just Bayisech. It's Bayisech. It means Reuven is history, and Sarah and Rivka, both wives of Shimon, and that's it. That's where the story begins and ends. Levi is born, Shimon dies, and it's two wives that fall from Shimon to even to Levi. Okay, now after learning this whole brisa, so what do we want to prove from this brisa? So, Hababa de Sefer. So we want to focus our attention on the last din in this brisa, where Levi was born and the Yibum of Shimon had already taken place. It's written in stone. And Laman Ketani Law. Ilay Rabbi Meir Ketani Law. Is michti lo shani le Rabbi Meir ein yibem liachkach nola the bein nola liachkach yibem. Rabbeinu v'lisnenu. We'll come back to that in a minute. Elalav Rabbi Shimon. U'biyimen v'achach nolad Holy Reb Shimon, and he's Mater or Levi, but Benolad the Achach Yimen Lopol. Then he would concede to Rabbi Meir, and she's Asur, Shmamina. It seems like the Shmamina means that the bottom line of this whole sugya is that we reject Rav Oshi in favor of Rav Chizda. But let's just go over this Larbinu Vilistinu, just for the sake of finishing this sugya, of Shlemus HaSugya. Now, according to Rabbi Meir, representing the Chachamim who disagree with Rav Shimon, there's no difference whatsoever between Nolad v'Achakach Yibem, if Shimon's Yibum took place after Levi came into the world, or if the Yibum took place before Levi was born. In both cases, Sarah is an erva to Levi, and therefore our bevinu v'lisnenu, the Tana should have shortened its long-winded presentation and should have integrated two different sections of this brisa. It should have said the following: Hansa umes achach nolad lo ach. I guess this is lo zu afsu. Anyway, konsa umes v'achach nolad lo ach, o nolad lo ach v'achka konsa umes, o konsa v'nolad lo ach v'achakach mes, shteim pturis min hachalitza v'ayib. So in other words, the psak of shteim pturis min hachalitza v'ayib, which appears over and over again in this price, is really one and the same for all the different scenarios. And it matters not whether the Yibum took place after the Leda of Levi or before the Leda of Levi, so that all these cases should be integrated under one rubric, which would be Shteim Pturis Min HaChalitza V'Nayibum. So therefore, the Brisa, by adding a bava of Nolad V'Achkach Yibei, must be referring to Rabbi Shimon. And it's telling you that even Reb Shimon would be more than in the case of Nolad v'Achkach Yibem, that there's no Yibem. Right. And the whole thrust of Reb Shimon's argument, his logic, is Matzah Behet. Matzah the Mapikei Behet. Omar Mar, Omar Asheni Lasos Maimer B'Yavimto. Hello, Hispik Lasos Maimer B'Yavimto. Anshenolad Lo Achu Mes. Rishona Yotza Mishumeshes Achu Shalo Hayabol Lomo. Ushnia Ochaletzes Omis Yabevis. In other words, there's no din of tzaras erva. I mean, I would say pshita my kamash. No, if Shimon died, maybe the kamash was that we don't say zika kiknusa. Let's think about it. But let me ask my question. What's the case here? The case is that Shimon did nothing and died. So obviously, Sarah falls through Reuven and Rivka through Shimon. And if that be the case, then as far as Rachel is concerned, as far as Sarah is concerned, Levi is Eishes Achim Shel Haybo Lama. is therefore Sarah is completely free. And Rivka falls from youth to youth through Shimon. So what exactly is the? I don't know. I don't know. We'll see the Gemara's analysis. I would have stopped here and said Pshita, my Kamashman. One second. When was Levi born? Levi was born before Shimon died. That's it. That's the whole story. So Sarah falls to even through Reuven, and Rivka falls to even through Shimon. I don't know how you could have argued with this. There must be a chiddush in the fact that Shimon had prepared to do mine. Now, machshava kemandi ovid lo avrid. The fact that a person prepared to do a ma'aser doesn't mean anything. Let's say so-and-so wanted to marry so-and-so, and he died before he got a chance to marry her, and she doesn't fall for even to his brother. You understand what I mean? There's, so what's the Havamina here? What's the language again? Omad Lohistic. I'm wondering if there would be a Havamina here. Say that we have Shnei Yevamot, Shnei Noshim Mishnei Yevamot. I'm sorry, Ishachas Mishnei Yevamot. Maybe we could say, again, it's a crazy idea, but just to throw it out there, that Shimon, once he decided to give Maimar to, what's his name, to Sarah, then like she's designated for a marriage relationship to Shimon. All right. Let's see what the Gemara says. I was trying to outsmart the Gemara, but Gemara says, "My Omad, my lo hispa, e ovad, ovad, fi lo ovid, lo ovad." The whole thing. I think the Gemara is asking that question. Well, the man had a havam, of doing mine. So what? Ella Omad midaito. Lo hisvig midaita el bal karch. Oh my gosh, this is interesting. There's no such thing as marrying a woman against her will. The Torah is not always fair to women. You could say, I can divorce my wife against her will according to Torah law, but I can't marry a woman against her will. And here it's a Yibam situation. So a heck of a lot different because Yibam is even Bal Karcha. So therefore, Maimar of Yibam might be Bal Karcha. Udelo Rebbe. So apparently Rebbe held this very smart that since Yibam is Bal Karcha, then Maimar of Yibam is Bal Karcha. And our Brisa is coming to Machadish that we don't accept Rebbe's Shita. Therefore, with all due respect, he gave her kesef and shtar, and he threw it in her lap. And he said, but she threw it back into his lap. It's nothing, because there's no such thing as Kedusha Midaita. So that Maimar is an entity, according to our Brisa, against Rebbe, is operating with the mechanics of Kedusha. It's not a brand new kind of Kedusha that the Rabbanan are inventing. And this reminds me of the principle called Kol the Tikkun Rabbanan Kein D'Oraisa Tikkun. The Rabbanan can make an institution, but it's got to fit into the pattern of the D'Oraisa frame. But Rebbe says no. Rebbe says, you know what? when we upgrade and recognize Maimar, it's as a Yibum. We're giving it as an alternative to Yibum. Instead of Bia, is Kesef and Shtar is enough. And just like Bia works Bal Karcha, so too Kesef and Shtar in the case of Yevamot works Bal Karcha. The Rabbanan say no. The Rabbanan saying this is Kedushin. We're recognizing it as Kedushin. It's a mice of Kesef and Shtar is Kedushin. And Kedushin can't be Bal Karcha. The Sanya also Maimer B'Yavimta Shalom Midaita, Rebbe Omer Kana, Tachomer Melokan. My time with the Rebbe, let's see if I was a big enough Chacham to think of this answer. Let's hope. If not, I'm going to have to retire. Early retirement. Yeah, my time with the Rebbe, Gomar Bia Diyavama, Gomar Mi Bia Diyavama. Excellent. This is exactly what we were saying. Rebbe is a very attractive physician. He's saying, this is not Kedushin. This Kedushin of the Yibum in which we are upgrading the status of Maimar to Yibum is Ma Bia Diyavama Bal Karach, Av Kedushin Diyavama Bal Karach. The Rabbanon, Gamri Kedushin the Alma. If the Rabbanon are recognizing a mice of Kesef and Shtar as marriage, it's within the framework of Kedushin. Ma Kedushin the Alma Midaita, Av Kedushin the Yavama Midaita. We might come this. Oh, this already. The might come this. I don't know what's coming around the bend here. Then now I've exhausted my mental capabilities. So what's the might come if? Mar Sava Mili Divama Havi Leilmeilef. Mar Sava Mili Kedushin Mili the Kedushin Havi Leilmeilef. All right, I would say that this is just a further embellishment of what we had before. And Rebbe Shita is that we are setting up a substitute Yibum. There's an alternative method to Yibum, which the Rabbanan recognized the Torah did not, and that's Kesef or Shtar. But it's really alternative of Yibum. It's Mili Diyavama, Havi Leilmeilef. And therefore it works Balkar. Mar Savar, Chachamim disagree with Rebbe, and that's our Brisa here. Mili Kedushin, in other words, Yesh Lemon and Yana Kedushin, Al Kain Yesh Ledamos, Din Kedushin Shal Yevama, Ledin Kedushin Ish Bialba, She'ena Elami Daita. Now, what does he want here in this footnote? John, you have footnote number Yud here?
Yes.
What does this mean? Lav dafka mean. What does this mean? Lav dafka midas hamiskadesh. Midas mishmakna also. He's talking about the father then. Well, let's see. Imi ktano naira shenis armalo. Mina eris and array he miskadesh das. Ooh. Oh, I see what he's saying. Wow, this is a brilliant flash. He's saying, what are you talking about? The Rabbanan is saying we're limited in the case of Maimar to define it and classify it by the definitions that apply the regulations of Kedushin. Okay, I'm going to give you a case of Kedushin, Shalom Midait. There is such a thing as a woman who's married against her will. In fact, there are two such scenarios. Well, again, it's really one, but there are two permutations, if you will. But a katana could be married off by a father, and she's yelling and screaming, I don't want this love. I have other ideas about who I want to marry. Even a katana might be intelligent enough to think that, no? But yet the Torah recognizes that marriage against her will. Another scenario would be a naira who's between 12 and 12 and a half. And she was married off with what's called Erisin, but there was no Nesuin. And then her husband either divorced her or died. Now she goes back to Beis Avil. So the answer is that we have Dasma. Who's the Makna? Yeah, she, the Ketana, or the Nara in that case, is the nicknames, but she's not the Makna. And the Torah gave the das of Kedushin in these cases over to the father. He's the Baal Hadas. He's the Makna. So there's no such thing as Kedushin Baal Korach. I'm just wondering, can we find a scenario in a Ketana case, just a second, where he does Maimar Baal Korach? So let's imagine a Ketana who fell for evil. In other words, let's imagine the following: the father married off his daughter, who's a Ketana, to Reuven. Reuven dies without children. The Ketana now falls for Yibum to Shimon, and Shimon does Maimar Baal Korach. Rabbanan would say, we don't recognize that Maimar. We need that, because Maimar is what's the language here? Is Mili the Kedushin, Mili Kedushin, Kayal Fino. So we need the das of the father. Because in Kedushin, we must have das makna. And das makna, in this case of a Ketana, is going to be the das of the father. 1 second. But according to Rebbe's going to say, no, Yibum Yalfina. Therefore, the Maimar will be chal even against the will of the father. Which means the following. If a man marries off his Ketana to Reuven, and Reuven dies without children, and she falls to Shimon, Shimon could be the Yabim Habal Korcha, meaning he doesn't have to call up the father and say, my future shver, I want your approval for this marriage. He doesn't need any approval for the marriage, because Yibum is Bal Korcha. It's Memela if Shimon does a Maimar Bal Korcha, according to Rebbe, Yalfinan Miyavama, Ma Yavima Shalom Dato is Af Maimar Shalom. Okay then? So this is where we're going to stop for today. Let's see. Today is Monday, correct? Where are we up to? Help me out over here, Abosai. Asaba Maimar. Where is this? How many lines?
Across from second to last.
Okay. What's the first word in the line, if you can? Oh, Mila. So that's for Tuesday. Okay, because if I don't write this down, there's very little chance that I'll. Okay, then.